So for an oil change, what we need, the basics here, you're going to need SAE 10W30 engine oil. Sometimes it'll come in a container like this, oftentimes it'll come in a container like this. What you're looking for is motor oil for a 4-stroke engine. It doesn't really need to say all of that, here it does. But in general, you want to make sure you're buying this stuff and not something such as this non-detergent lubricating oil. This is actually used on our pumps, but we're not going to use this for the engine. Sometimes that'll show up as high pressure pump oil. You should have both of these things in your unit. Just make sure you're using the engine oil for the engine and the pump oil for the pump. You're also going to want some sort of receptacle here for draining your oil into your used engine oil. You're going to want something to measure out your new oil. And then you're going to want some funnels. Generally a couple different sizes are nice in case one, like this one, may have too large of an opening to fit neatly into the actual engine itself. Now what we want to do is we want to identify where the oil is stored in the engine. So you'll see on this MITM, you have these nice orange knobs. Over here on this Simpson, you have a very similar setup where you have a gray knob here, and on the other side, you have a black knob. Now, on some smaller pressure washers, it may actually be a bolt that is on the end of the engine, and that will be tucked behind the wheel, and it will look exactly like that bolt there, and you'll drain the oil through that tube. Now, on this engine, you could do either. We're going to do the easier route here today. Now, we're going to use the bigger funnel for draining the oil. You want to use, ideally, you want to use different receptacles for used and new oil to avoid mixing the new oil with that old oil. A little bit of mix is not going to be a big deal, having some old engine still in the machine, as you're not going to be able to drain it fully, but ideally we get as much new oil in there as possible. So all you need to do is you need to twist off one of these sides, and you're going to twist off the side on the opposite end, so you can see where the dipstick is here. Twist off it on the opposite end for airflow. You don't technically need to do this, but this will make it much quicker. It's also nice if you've had the engine running earlier to be able to get that oil a little bit warmer. It'll be less viscous, it'll flow much easier. But if you don't have any water hookup to be able to run this engine properly, do not start it in your storage unit or without water in the system, as you may break some valves in the system or in the pump. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take it right up to here and we're gonna tip this over. You can see this engine oil is very, very dirty. It's almost entirely black. Black oil is just fine. You don't want to see any sort of metal shavings or flakes in your oil. For a brand new pressure washer, you're going to want to drain that oil after the first 4 or 5 hours of engine use. After that, every 40 hours or every 2 weeks, if you're using it repeatedly, is a good maintenance schedule for replacing engine oil. So we're going to tip this until we get all of that oil out and we start to see this decreasing in flow. We're going to clean our dipstick off. So we're just going to use a shop towel or some paper towel to clean that off until it's nice and clean. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start measuring out oil. I recommend you start with 16 ounces of oil, and then you'll check with your dipstick on that fill level. Underfilling the oil slightly is not generally a big deal. Overfilling, you'll start to see some white smoke coming out of the engine. If that's the case, turn it off and drain it slightly into some sort of safe container, such as a water bottle. You don't want to drain that into the client's yard. Now we're going to get some new oil. Now notice the color difference between the new and the used oil, as this is a nice golden color. So we're going to go up to 16 ounces and we'll adjust the fill from there. Now, you don't want to rush this. You want to go nice and slow. We're going to see if this funnel fits. It looks like it does. However, this has a nice little tip, so we'll just fill it like this. I'm going to leave this nice and level, and we're going to begin filling this engine with oil. Now, if I was a little bit smarter, I would have put a paper towel down underneath, but I'll just go really slow today. And if there's some oil, it's my garage floor, so it'll be okay. We used almost all this oil. There's just a little bit left in here, but if you look down here in good lighting, you actually can't see any oil there. Ideally, the oil will start to come up a little bit into where we're screwing it in, so we're going to put in a little bit more oil. Oftentimes, these engines will take up to 18 or 20 ounces of oil before they're full, but we want to start with 16 in case there's a little bit left over in there. Now what we're going to do, we're going to screw this dipstick all the way in. and then we're gonna unscrew it and we're gonna see where the oil is on here. In general, somewhere in the middle is what you're looking for. If it's towards the top, it may be slightly overfilled, but might not be. If you aren't getting any oil yet, put in a couple more ounces, repeatedly until you're starting to actually see that. So we are going to align this and we are going to screw this in all the way. And then we're going to unscrew it and we're gonna see where that oil is. So as we can see, there's still some dirty oil in there. I guess it wasn't drained fully, but that's okay. And we can see that that oil goes all the way up to the top. So it's filled, it may be slightly overfilled. All right, so I screwed in the dipstick side, and now we're gonna screw in this back side as well. Make sure these are screwed in nice and tight. Now the only other thing to do, this oil is completely changed. We need to figure out how we're gonna dispose of this old oil. A good thing to do is to save an empty one of these, or if it's nearly empty, that's fine as well. A little bit of oil being wasted that's fresh is totally fine. And we'll actually dump it in here. Now we're not gonna do that today as this is almost entirely full. We'll find another way to dispose of this. Save those old oil containers and take them to the dump at the end of the year. You don't wanna throw this in the trash or dispose of this on the ground or anything like that, as that is a toxic waste.